Yeah. So from the top, when you get into country, and here's the thing, there's also a possibility that you'll be virtually deployed. So you're trying to do all of this via Zoom and WhatsApp. So everything that you're learning in this training is going to hopefully be helpful to you, no matter whether you're going to be supporting in person or through a screen. So first, you want to understand who has the right data and access and insight, right? And half the problem is just figuring out who's the gatekeeper, who's the person you need to be talking to, and then you need to build a relationship very quickly, because you want them to share information and data with you that's not publicly available, right? And that means you have to build trust. I always find it very helpful when doing technical assistance work. The place I start with is, how can I help you? How can I help you do your job better? How can I make your life easier? Because my job is to support you. And you should always think about it in that frame, that your success really is measured by the success of the people that you're supporting. So you want to think about who has the access, who has the right data, and how do you connect those dots? And when you've looked at the data, what do you know? What do you not know? And what assumptions are you making? You've probably heard some echoes of this in some of the little info drops and feedback that Tina and I have been giving you. Next, we'll talk about filtering. Once you have a lot of data and a lot of data points, think about, how does this data relate to the infodemic, right? And what is in scope? So recognize that there's some things that are not in your scope. You don't need to be worrying about PPE or ordering reagents. That's someone else's job. You want to be concerned with the issues that are related to issues about perceptions, attitudes, and health behaviors, and how that is impacted by the information environment that people are living in. You also want to look at, what is the strength of the evidence that you're looking at? Is it anecdote, or is it actual real hard data that is of a relatively high quality? It's probably going to be a mix, and it's probably going to be low quality data, especially early on in a response where people are just trying to understand and wrap their hands around the scope of and the scale of the problem, and where systems have not been set up to actually track how the outbreak is going or how the emergency is progressing. And that also is related to, what can you safely ignore? If you try to take on and analyze absolutely every single piece of information that comes across your desk, you're going to drive yourself crazy. I think I actually saw in one of the Elnor groups, someone was asking really deep, thoughtful questions about, what does the pelican have to do with anything with infodemic management? What does it mean that he's stealing fish from Bordada's port? Does that tell us something about the pleth? And what I would say about that is that there's not always going to be information that has an obvious infodemic management perspective to it. Sometimes there's just information that is nice to know, but not terribly helpful to your day job. So just think about what you can safely ignore and put that to the side. Next, we have prioritization. What are your priorities in infodemic management? Based on the data that you've collected and based on you figuring out what's important and relevant, and then identifying where are there data voids, where are there gaps in your knowledge. And that goes back to the assumptions question. Make sure you question your assumptions. And that if there is a gap, you're saying, we know a lot about population X, but not about population Y, then we need to do more collection of data on population Y. And maybe that's what you decide is your priority in infodemic management. Or you decide there's a lot of questions coming in, a lot of misinformation, but the Ministry of Health doesn't even have a website dedicated to COVID-19 information. That's going to be our priority, just as an example. So you really want to think about, what are your priorities based on the gaps that you're seeing? And leveraging that into, how does this particular priority ladder up to the larger emergency response objectives? How does your infodemic work plug into that? And then next, we'll talk about building. We have to recognize that there's a lot that's not going to be in your control. You just have to accept that. And some things will be totally in your control. A few things might be partially within your control. Some things are not in your control at all. So when you have a Minister of Health who says, it's just like flu, COVID-19 isn't so bad, is it your job to fix that? Probably not. And so you want to think about what is within your scope and what is it within your power to fix or to change or to support or to improve. And so and then what are the quick wins? How can you hit the ground running and really demonstrate value quickly? And I don't mean to demonstrate your value. How do you help your colleagues at Ministry of Health, your colleagues in the country office, the people that you're working with? How do you help them demonstrate value? Because that is the easiest way to build relationships, make friends, build relationships, and be successful in infodemic management or any kind of technical assistance work you will be doing. And how to build in metrics. You really need to start at the get-go thinking about, how do we measure this? what you don't want to do is just generate stuff that's being pumped out, because then you have no idea how effective those things are. Because at some point, you want to be able to look at the data and say, okay, this seems to be working well. We should do more of that. This is not working so well. We should do less of that. And that will be based on strength of evidence. And then finally, how will your insights be added to the emergency response decision-making process? The worst thing that could happen is that you go into a country, you help support infodemic management work, come up with like a really cool thing, you analyze the data, you develop recommendations, and those recommendations sit on a shelf somewhere or in someone's inbox. So none of the insights or the recommendations that you have developed actually seem to impact the trajectory of the response. And that's a problem. You need to think very critically from the get-go, who do I need to talk to about plugging in these recommendations or these approaches? Who is in a position of power to be able to use these insights to help create a better response?